Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be talking to you about sleep paralysis and out-of-body experience. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the explanation scientifically and also the metaphysical perspective. I'll also tell you some practical ways on how to induce sleep paralysis and have your own out-of-body experience. At the end of the video, I'll be sharing my very first sleep paralysis episode with you guys way back from when I was 13. All of that coming up in this video. Alright, so first, let's talk about sleep paralysis and out-of-body experience in very practical terms. Like, what does it feel like as a phenomenon, like without any explanations behind it? Alright, so phenomenologically, as you experience it subjectively, what sleep paralysis is you wake up from sleep. Usually you wake up from sleep. Sometimes it can happen before sleep too, but usually it's waking up from sleep and you can't move your body. You might even feel a strong pressure on top of your chest, or you might feel like someone laid a lead blanket over your body, so you can't move any of your major muscle groups. You can still move your eyes around, you can still breathe, but everything else is completely paralyzed, and it's often accompanied by like a high-pitched radio, like vibrational buzzing sound in the ears, kind of like a kind of sound. Basically, imagine radio fuzz and you'll have that sound. So phenomenologically, an out-of-body experience is where you actually get up from your physical body and you can move around in your environment. And this is very, very consistent with how your environment normally is. So you're getting up, you're walking around in your room, you're walking out into your living room, and everything looks about 95% the same. And this does not feel like a dream at all. You feel like you've literally gotten up from the bed. And in fact, I've had times when I've had out-of-body experiences where I didn't even realize they were out-of-body experiences until strange things happen or I snap back into my body. Alright, so that's what those things feel like phenomenologically. Also, people who experience sleep paralysis or out-of-body experience often report seeing shadowy figures or evil spirits, or have the feeling that they're being abducted by aliens or something of that nature. So those type of things can happen too, and I've had my own experiences with seeing very, very unsettling things during the state of sleep paralysis and during out-of-body experience. Now, out-of-body experience usually happens directly after sleep paralysis. So you could kind of say that sleep paralysis is like the very beginning stage of out-of-body experience. So it's kind of like the gateway to out-of-body experience. So if you've had sleep paralysis yourself and haven't had an out-of-body experience, you were very, very close to achieving that. But anyway, let's look at the science behind what's going on in your body when you experience sleep paralysis. So basically, every night when you go to sleep, your brain releases two different chemicals, glycine and GABA, and these basically keep you from acting out your dreams. Now, there are obvious safety implications here, like, you don't want to be walking off a cliff because you're walking around in your dream, and you also don't want to hurt yourself or hurt others. So it's very good that these chemicals exist. Now, it seems like sleepwalkers might have some kind of deficiency in these chemicals, making them get up, but basically it keeps you still. Now, so that means that everybody, except maybe sleepwalkers, have sleep paralysis every night, and it usually happens 4 to 5 times a night, and that's because it happens during the REM cycle of sleep. So that time when you're actually dreaming during the REM cycle, these chemicals get released into the body, paralyze you. Now, sometimes people will wake up and they'll basically wake up while these chemicals are still in effect in their body, and they won't be able to move. So it's a very, very simple chemical thing. Now, as far as the scientific explanation behind out-of-body experience, the scientific explanation is basically that you are basically projecting hallucinations out onto your eyelids that makes it seem like you're actually getting up and walking around. You're not actually getting up and walking around, but basically your mind is projecting a reality that's very consistent with normal reality, and you're walking around in that reality and kind of projecting it out like you would a dream. Now, about 50% of people will experience sleep paralysis in their lifetime, and so it's a very, very common state. Now, 8% of people, including myself, get this state frequently. Like for me personally, since I was 13 and I'm now 26, so that's been 13 years. Over the past 13 years, I've had hundreds of episodes of sleep paralysis, and maybe about a fifth to a quarter of them resulting in an out-of-body experience. So it's actually a very common phenomenon that people experience. So you want to kind of take heart in the fact that there's a scientific explanation, and also that it's been found to be a completely harmless state that really just has to do with kind of an imbalance of chemicals in the body and brain, like a momentary lapse there. So those things are true. So you essentially, you cannot be hurt by things in sleep paralysis. So even if you're seeing like demons and they're like trying to eat your soul or saying something of that nature, that's basically, there's no actual danger there. Now, because sleep paralysis has been a phenomenon experienced by people in every culture has a different understanding of why it happens. Now, something that is reported throughout different cultures is basically having some kind of demon or hag or evil entity sitting on your chest. And there's actually many different types of artwork and many folklores in relation to this. And in fact, in the UK, I think it was called having a hag on your chest. Hags are pretty common to see in this state. And so every culture has their particular explanation of this, and it usually has to do with some kind of evil entity or spirit. Now, it's posited by scientists that sleep paralysis occurs because of different factors, like getting too much or too little sleep, or eating something that didn't agree with you, or maybe you're just dealing with a lot of stress in life. And so those things can definitely put an impact in there. Like for me personally, especially with any kind of interruptions in sleep patterns, I'm a lot more likely to experience sleep paralysis. However, what I've also found is that I'm very noise sensitive when it comes to sleep paralysis. Like when I was in college, I used to live on the 3rd floor in the dormitory, and the girls who lived right underneath me on the 2nd floor, they used to always leave their ceiling fan running. It was an old ceiling fan, so it had like a clanky, clunky sound to it. So all night it was like clang, 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 clang. And not only was it really, really annoying, and kept me up a little bit, it was really annoying, but it also really affected me and put me into sleep paralysis, because basically the resonance in my ear that I would hear, that high-pitched buzzing noise, the high-pitched radio fuzz, would get in tune with that. And so basically it would just be like, it would paralyze my body, and then clang, 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 is like kind of how the phenomenon sounds, I would say. Terrible impressions. I can't make sound effects very well, but that's okay. Now in these cases, oftentimes I wanted to just get back to sleep, and so I would snap myself out of it. And over the years, I've learned how to be able to do that very, very efficiently. Now oftentimes I see people recommend moving toes and fingers or any kind of other small muscle groups, and I'm sure that works great. My trick is that I move the small muscles in my abdomen. I just tense my abdomen a little bit, because that was what I can move during sleep paralysis, because you can't move your major muscle groups. And so that snaps me out of it just like that. So that's what I recommend. It works best for me. But again, you could try the fingers and toes too. Anyway, so that is the scientific perspective in a nutshell. Now, before I go on and talk about the metaphysical perspective, I want to kind of preface it by saying that I'm not always 100% comfortable talking about things from the metaphysical perspective. Number one, just because I can't really say for sure, I don't know these things for sure, and I don't like to really share a lot of information that I can't offer some kind of proof or have had some kind of definitive, yes, this is true moment for me. However, I will say that there is a particular metaphysical perspective that jives with my experience and completely makes sense to me. However, I also have like this concern of self-image and image for my brand. Like, I want to make sure that you guys can come here and see that I'm going to be giving you good, credible information. So there's kind of a resistance I have to seeming woo-woo or airy-fairy, and, like, I really want to make sure that this is very, very grounded advice, and even in the realm of spirituality, I want to keep that very grounded. Now, that said, that's more of an issue of vanity and of self-image. And I feel like if I were to ignore the metaphysical perspective and just say, oh yeah, it's all science, like, I think that that would be taking way too much for granted, because I think, there's just so much that we don't know as human beings. There's so many things that, we take for granted as true as it is, that aren't necessarily true. And so in the spirit of open-mindedness and in the spirit of really trying to entertain new possibilities, I'm going to share the metaphysical perspective, the one that just jibes the most with my personal experiences and what makes the most sense to me. So here's the metaphysical explanation of sleep paralysis and out-of-body experience. Basically, you want to think of your body and the world as existing on multiple dimensions at the same time. So right now you're tuned into the third dimensional aspect of yourself as a solid person, and you are aware of the third dimensional world. But there's the idea that there are other dimensional versions of yourself. So you have a fourth dimensional version of yourself that lives in the fourth dimensional world, and so on and so forth on, probably into infinity. And so there are all these dimensions that we have access to. And basically, you think about yourself as kind of like a radio dial that tunes your frequency to your particular dimensional aspect. So right now, if I'm aware of my third dimensional aspect, I am tuned into that frequency, the solid, tamasic, things don't change, things keep consistency. You go away from your house, you come back, your house is in the same exact shape as it was. Your thoughts don't change that. Now, when it comes to getting into the state of sleep paralysis, that is basically your body changing frequency. So essentially, that high-pitched buzzing noise that I referred to, that resonance, is kind of like your human radio changing stations. And so your third dimensional aspects still exist in the third dimension, but you are tuning your consciousness into higher dimensional aspects of yourself. So when you tune it up, you end up in the fourth or fifth dimensional aspect of yourself, or whichever dimensional aspect people say that it is. That one, I'm not super familiar with the different dimensional aspects. I'm not super well read on the metaphysical perspective in that way. But basically, your third dimensional aspect will translate your experience that you are getting up out of your body. But the reality of the matter is that you are just awake in that other dimensional aspect of yourself, moving around in that other dimension. And so all of the things that you experience are real on that particular dimensional reality. Now, another thing that I heard in relation to this was in relation to the law of attraction, which basically states that you're going to, like attracts like, you're going to attract things that have a similar vibrational frequency to you. And so whenever you're in your astral body or your out-of-body experience in the fifth dimensional reality, emotions that you feel are going to attract various things to you. So if you are experiencing the emotion of fear while you're having an out-of-body experience, then you are going to attract to you symbols of your own fear that are going to come into your space. And so that's why so many people have shadowy figures, because people who have these experiences have not known about any type of other explanation other than the superstitious, oh my goodness, there's a creature right here. And so it becomes naturally a very scary, unknown experience. So that's why many people's experiences are negative in out-of-body experience. Now, if you come into it and you think, wow, look at all the possibilities. I have an entirely different world than I can explore, and I have complete freedom here. And you take that sense of empowerment, then you can basically manifest very positive things into that dimensional reality that you're experiencing from having an out-of-body experience. And so you can basically do what your heart's desire. You can talk to somebody who has passed away. Like, I really like Carl Jung. Maybe I might like to have a conversation with Carl Jung when I'm in out-of-body experience. And so I can just manifest that into my experience, and whether it's real or not, it's still pretty cool. And, so basically it gives you a whole entirely different world to explore, even if it's not necessarily real in the way that we consider things real. Still a very valuable, interesting experience. Anyway, so basically, whenever you are having an out-of-body experience, from a metaphysical perspective, you are not necessarily going out of your body per se, but more so you are tuning into a different dimensional frequency of yourself. So you are, instead of being in your physical body, you are in your astral or etheric body, going about in the astral or etheric realm. So it kind of, so I think that perspective kind of works on an intuitive level. Again, take it with a grain of salt. I really don't know if it's true, but it makes sense to me. And I just think it's a lot more fun to treat out-of-body experience as though it's a real experience. Now, it can be a little scary if you're seeing demons and things like that, but I think that it comes with great value to actually go into it as though it's a real experience, because it's fun. It's fun. It's interesting. Also, in regard to either perspective, the scientific or the metaphysical perspective, I tend to look at things from the shadow work perspective, and I think that it would just be a great way to explore your unconscious and to become more conscious of things that you're not normally conscious of. So even if it's only the scientific perspective, or if it's the scientific and the metaphysical perspective together, you can kind of with the power of intention, you can will your shadows to show themselves to you there. So it's kind of like shadow work in virtual reality, like virtual reality shadow work. So that's a pretty interesting thing. Now, whether or not you entertain the metaphysical perspective and the scientific perspective at once, or if you're a scientific purist, or even if you're a metaphysical purist, either way, regardless of what your beliefs are in relation to the realness or non-realness of this phenomenon, I will say that it is certainly one of the most interesting things that I've ever experienced in my life, and there's really nothing like it. And so I would say that regardless of the empirical reality of what's going on with you, I highly recommend inducing one of these. It's a peak experience, and ultimately you won't regret having had it. There's no danger to having it, even if it's a little scary, and ultimately it's a lot like lucid dreaming in that way, that you have conscious control over where you go in reality, but no responsibilities and no consequences for bad behavior, so that's always fun. But anyway, let me go ahead and I will tell you about the basic stages to having an out-of-body experience, and I'll kind of tell you how to kind of prime yourself and get into that state, because there can be some pitfalls along the way where if you're trying to induce an out-of-body experience, you can end up just accidentally waking yourself up and kind of wasting your opportunity for the experience. Alright, so the first stage to inducing an out-of-body experience is the actual sleep paralysis stage itself. And so that's that stage where you can't move your body, you're hearing the vibrational resonance most of the time. 95% of the time when I have it, I hear a vibration in the ears. And basically, you're just staying, you're sitting there. So you don't want to, once you get there, you don't want to move any of your muscles, like not even your small muscles, because that could accidentally snap you out of it. But to get there in the first place, one thing I recommend is falling asleep on your back. And then also, you can, from a state of non-drowsiness, lay on your back for a long period of time, maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and just take deep breaths. Don't move any of your muscles. You're trying to convince your mind, basically you're trying to convince your body to fall asleep while your mind stays awake. And so you can even repeat the affirmation, mind awake, body asleep. Mind awake, body asleep. Of course, you're not going to repeat it out loud because that would be moving muscles and you don't want to do that. You want to convince your mind that you are already asleep. Alright, so that's the first step. The second step is the part where you actually get up from your body, and this is the trickiest part. The trickiest part is getting up out of your body without actually waking yourself up in life. And this I have so many issues with. I'm by no means a pro at getting out of body. Even though I've been having it for the past 13 years, I still end up waking myself up and I still end up snapping myself right back into my body. Now, what you're going to do to actually get up is you can use different visualizations. Like you can imagine that you are pulling yourself out of your body using a rope. I've heard that one's very popular. I've never used it myself. Most of the time, I just try to sit up from my body. And there's an issue here because, again, I wake myself up by moving the small muscles in my abdomen, and when I sit up in life, of course I'd be using my abdominal muscles to do so. And so if I accidentally move my real physical body as opposed to my astral body or the out-of-body experience body, I could end up snapping myself right back into just waking up, and I could totally waste the entire experience. There are also other ways to do it, like you can imagine kind of floating up out of your body toward the ceiling. That's a very popular one. I also have found that turning around, like kind of rotating the body, so like if you're laying down like this, kind of just turning like this and then kind of sitting up from there, that works incredibly well too. Either way, you just kind of have to set your intention and be really clear about where you want to go. And ultimately, with some practice, you'll start to get it. Alright, the third step is actually going around and exploring your environment. And now, even though this one isn't quite as tricky as actually getting up, there can be some pitfalls too, and there have been many times where I've ended up accidentally, like kind of snapping myself out of it, ending up back in my body, and kind of cutting my experience short. So sometimes what I've experienced is once I'm out of my body, I have a very hard time getting my bearings. Like a lot of times I'll end up like getting out of my body and then I'm just kind of floating around as a presence like right next to like the underneath of my bed, and where I'm actually able to see underneath my bed and everything. It's very uncanny, this experience, even if it's not empirically real. It's very, very consistent with reality for the most part. And so a lot of times I'll end up just kind of floating around there, or sometimes like I'll end up other places and I'll end up just kind of losing control of myself. Like I remember when I first got together with my husband, I was staying the night at his house and I had had an out-of-body experience where I didn't get up from my body or anything, but I just ended up outside on the road, like out in front of his house, and I just started uncontrollably floating upward, but only like the bottom part of my legs were stiff and in control. Every other part of my body felt like I was like trying to fall off of myself, is the only way I could describe it. Like just a complete lack of control and just kind of a floating kind of, I can't do anything. Now, a lot of the time, it becomes the case where I have a very hard time moving around. So instead of like that kind of loose, can't even get myself under control feeling, it's like I can't even move. So like if you ever had a dream where like somebody's attacking you and like you can only go so slow, and it's like you're moving through water when you try to defend yourself because it's so slow. I've had situations like that before. Like one time I was able to get past the stage where I separated from my body, and I was walking from my bedroom through the hallway into the living room and out the front door, but the whole time it was like I was walking and I had like a rubber band like just keeping me back, like just like some kind of resistance that I was having to move against. Like it was so difficult to even move. And ultimately that one didn't end up being very fruitful because I ended up trying so hard that I ended up right back in my body. So it's very important to relax and not to get too excited in this state, because if you get too excited in this state, you're going to end up right back in your body. You're going to waste your experience. All right, now the fourth stage is re-entry. It's that snapping yourself back in. Pretty self-explanatory, difficult not to do for beginners. So in this state, if you're exploring out-of-body experience, don't worry about not finding your way back to your body. You know, chances are you're going to end up just snapping yourself back a bunch of times. You know, especially for beginners, it's very difficult to control yourself and to keep yourself in that state for a long time. However, this state normally only lasts a handful of minutes anyway, 10 minutes max. I've never had an out-of-body experience last for much longer than that. Now, I'm sure that people who are really seasoned practitioners of out-of-body experience, like the real pros, they might be able to stay out for who knows how long at a time. But for me, as just a person who has had a lot of sleep paralysis and out-of-body experience, you know, I would say that I'm not able to stay out that long. Now, without further ado, I will tell you my very first sleep paralysis experience. And so this was before I knew anything about sleep paralysis and before I had had anything spooky happen to me before, except for when I was a kid, but a lot of kids have very creepy experiences and could have been written off. And so first time I had that experience, I was staying the night over at my mother's house, and I didn't have an official bed there, and so I was staying the night in her bed, and I was on the side of the bed with the alarm clock, and she was on the other side of the bed. And I had kind of a routine where I would stay up and I would watch my favorite anime shows, and then I would go go to bed at 12 and wake up at 8 the next day to go to middle school. And so this time I did that, only I was having a really hard time falling asleep afterward, and I was like, oh no, it's 1 o'clock, I'm not going to be able to get up on time, you know, how am I going to be in school the next day? And so I finally was able to get to sleep, and I had this little short dream, and I remember it was of my friend Tyler trying to sell me chocolates. I don't know why I remember it, that was a dream. And I woke up, and it was like, I'm going to just make up a number, 2:46 in the morning. And I woke up and I knew that I was so awake. Like, I was like, oh my god, I am not going to be able to get up for school tomorrow. And so I was just laying there for a few minutes, just staring at the alarm clock, just hating life because I wasn't able to get to sleep. And so I was facing away from my mom and toward the alarm clock. And then as I was doing that, all of a sudden, from behind me, like, my mom starts to tickle me under the armpits. And like, I even hear like a kind of situation. Now, my mom can be silly sometimes, and she can like cut up with me and stuff like that. But this would be a little bit unusual for her, even in waking life, like for her to do that. You know, maybe when I was like a little kid, she would have done something like that. But she definitely wouldn't have woken me up in the middle of the night to do that. But I was still kind of in like that hazy, like just woke up from a dream kind of state. And so I was like, Mom, stop it. Like, I didn't think that it was weird right offhand. And then she didn't stop, it just kept going, and she kept tickling me, and I'm very ticklish, so it's like, ah, but then it just kept getting tighter and tighter and tighter until the tickling sensation just felt like somebody was literally shoving 2 metal rods in underneath like my arm sockets, under my armpits, and like it really, really hurt. And the tighter that sensation got, the less I was able to move, and the more terrified I got, because I'm also realizing that, oh my god, this is not my mother doing this. Like, I don't know what it is that's behind me doing this. There's something back there doing this to me. And so, like, in my head, like, this image that was my mother doing this, that I was imagining in my mind's eye, just turned into this, like, evil banshee creature. Again, I didn't see this, but that's, like, what I was imagining it was. And I wasn't able to snap myself out of the paralysis, and I was just screaming silently, trying to like beg for help. And so I was like, because my vocal cords are paralyzed and I could not make any sound. And so basically all I could do is move my eyes around and I could still breathe. And so I was just praying for the pain to stop, and I was just like, God, please help me. And eventually it subsided. And I was like, oh my goodness, I just had a demon try to possess me. That's exactly what just happened right there. And, you know, I did not know anything about sleep paralysis yet, so I was just terrified. And then, like, the very next night, a similar kind of situation happened to me, but luckily it didn't last as long and nothing creepy came from it, but I had the sleep paralysis again. And now, ever since that happened, you know, after a couple years of that happening and totally thinking that I'm being haunted and possessed by demons, I found scientific information about sleep paralysis that really alleviated some of my fears. And essentially, I get sleep paralysis pretty often, at least once a month, maybe twice a month. Or if there's a time where I'm particularly stressed, I might get it even a few times a week. So I've had hundreds of these experiences by now. And again, I sometimes am uncomfortable when it happens, particularly if I have a scary experience like my very first experience, and occasionally that still does happen. But most of the time, you know, it's a really positive experience, and it gives me this feeling like, ooh, I can totally use this to explore my subconscious, or maybe possibly even another dimension. Either way, I'm cool with it because there's no consequences there, so it's basically like a reality that I can do whatever I want to do in. So I highly recommend trying to induce sleep paralysis and out-of-body experience for yourself. There's really nothing like it. Other than that, that's all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and click the subscribe button below. Share this video with an open-minded friend, or if you know anyone who has sleep paralysis or tells you stories like this, then definitely point them in the direction of this video. You know, it could be alleviating to them, or maybe they might just like to know a little bit more information about sleep paralysis and OBEs. Other than that, that's all I have for you today, and until next time, keep becoming more you.